Welcome to this episode of Silicon Bites, and it is about the failure of the new Russian offensive, the one that is unfolding in Sumy Oblast, which is thought to be one of its first incursions as part of a broader summer offensive. Before we get into it, thank you to everybody who supports the channel, everybody who's become a patron, bought me a coffee, these kind of things. Your support is absolutely vital. And of course, not only does it help give us encouragement, but it also helps to keep going to produce this content, which in turn is supporting a Ukrainian victory. Today, we're focusing on Ukraine's Northeastern front, where the Kremlin started its summer offensive, which is apparently already burning out in the fields and woods of Sumy. 50,000 Russian troops are pinned down, it's claimed, as Ukraine halts the enemy's advance in Sumy Oblast, as Russia's rumored summer campaign gets underway. Based on the results of May and June, we can say that this year's wave of the enemy's summer offensive from Russian territory is faltering, says General Syrskyi, head of the Ukrainian armed forces, reporting that Russian troops in the northeastern border region had been stopped. After weeks of more intense Russian operations, Ukraine's military says it has stalled Moscow's advance in the Sumy Oblast, according to Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi. The enemy's offensive actions have been halted, with Russian forces trying to gain a foothold on the lines that they have reached, but finding themselves checked by coordinated Ukrainian resistance. This is a serious failure and a moment of reckoning for Putin's senseless invasion of Ukraine. The money is running out to fund his war machine, as we went through in the previous episode, and at the same time, his rabble army fails to make any significant gains on the ground. Then, to all intents and purposes, it's over for Putin. This is a moment to savour, of course, but we must not make light of it, because this victory is hard won by Ukraine and comes at the price of vicious fighting, terrible loss, trauma, injuries, and suffering. Just a month ago, Russia was pressing this northeastern sector in hopes of stretching Ukraine's lines and forcing Kiev to redistribute precious reserves. But the gamble is rapidly unraveling. Ukraine hasn't just stopped the advance, it's begun to reverse it. One of the key moments came near Velika Pisarivka, just kilometers from the Russian border. Ukraine's first separate battalion ambushed Russian troops, reportedly killing the unit commander and seizing their headquarters in a lightning strike. Euromaidan Press reports that in the chaos, documents, communications gear, and even encrypted equipment were captured. In another high-stakes encounter, Ukrainian paratroops from the 25th Separate Airborne Brigade captured 15 Russian soldiers, a rare and strategic intelligence windfall. Our boys are not just defending, they are actively disrupting enemy coordination, said a Ukrainian officer quoted by Ukrinform. Syrskyi said that Ukrainian operations in Russia's Glushkovsky district had forced Moscow to shift elite units, including airborne forces and Marine Corps brigades, into defensive positions, undermining their offensive capabilities in Sumy. In the northern Slobozhansky and Kursk directions, we have once again pinned down about 50,000 Russian armed forces personnel, Syrskyi said. He provided no further details about how Ukraine had achieved this, though. Ukraine launched a cross-border offensive into Russia's Kursk Oblast in August 2024, initially capturing 1,300 square kilometers before losing most of that territory in a Russian counterattack earlier this year. Moscow's push into Sumy may well be intended to try and prevent further Ukrainian incursions into Russian territory in this direction. Russia's initial push into Sumy aimed to carve out a new front, a psychological and logistical stretch for Ukraine, especially ahead of NATO's summer summit. But as The Independent reports, Syrskyi made clear the offensive is losing momentum. Fighting near towns like Krasnopilya and Belopilya remain intense, but Ukrainian forces appear to have absorbed the initial shocks. Syrskyi adds, Russia is losing tactical initiative as local commanders face coordination breakdowns and logistical fatigue on the Russian side. Medusa adds an important insight to the story. Russian sources are acknowledging the slowdown. Anonymous officials cited exhaustion and exposure to UAV strikes, that is, drone strikes, as critical challenges. Moscow had hoped that Sumy would be the soft underbelly, but it's proving to be anything but. Instead, it's turned into a meat grinder led by drones. The outnumbered Ukrainian army, which still has manpower issues and problems in creating greater rotation and recovery time for its weary troops, has increasingly come to rely on drone technology to counter Russian pressure. Colonel General Oleksandr Syrskyi claimed that these successes in Sumy have strategically prevented Russia from deploying approximately 50,000 troops, including elite airborne and marine brigades, to other critical areas of the front line. Across the broad 1,000-kilometre, 620 miles over the entire front line, Russian forces have continued to make slow, incremental gains in certain sectors. These advances have come, however, at significant costs in terms of troop casualties and armoured vehicles, which Russia can ill afford as it burns through its stock of Soviet-era equipment at a furious rate. The Russian forces' offensive into Sumy Oblast started with troops charging across open fields with the expectation of minimal resistance, but they encountered a carefully planned Ukrainian trap. Drawn far from their defensive lines and exposed in the open, Russian units were hit hard by a sudden Ukrainian counterstrike. Artillery, drones, and precision infantry maneuver devastated the attackers. Ukrainian forces quickly overran Russian command posts, shattered frontline cohesion, and forced dozens of Russian soldiers to surrender. Despite Putin's claim that capturing Sumy is not a primary goal, his assertion during the St. Petersburg Economic Forum that wherever Russian soldiers' boots have trodden, that becomes Russian territory, stands in stark contrast to current battlefield losses and the general failure of Russian troops to punch through. Russian diplomats even issued direct threats during the Istanbul negotiations, warning Ukraine it could lose both Sumy and Kharkiv if it didn't comply with Kremlin demands. Those threats ring hollow, like so many other pronouncements by the lackeys of the Kremlin dictator. So far, Ukraine has been able to turn the tide. In the opening days of the Russian offensive, Ukrainian forces appeared to retreat, offering limited resistance, but this was a strategic maneuver. Veteran Ukrainian units, including those with experience deep inside the Kursk Oblast, conducted a tactical withdrawal and repositioned into defensible areas within Sumy. Taking shelter in the forests, battle-hardened troops waited for the right moment. Ukrainian command anticipated that when Russian troops crossed into exposed terrain, they'd become highly vulnerable, and they were proved to be correct. Geolocated footage confirms fields littered with Russian casualties following intense drone strikes and artillery fire. Ukraine's ability to conserve its strength and then strike with precision turned a risky situation into a battlefield advantage. With Russian forces depleted, Ukraine seized the opportunity. The 225th Separate Assault Battalion, one of Ukraine's elite strike forces, led a fierce counteroffensive. In a matter of hours, Ukrainian troops retook the village of Andriivka, dismantling fortified Russian positions. One of the most significant blows came during the assault on a Russian frontline command post. Ukrainian soldiers overran the site and also killed Andrei Vyacheslavovich Yartsev, a battalion commander from Russia's 30 Motorized Rifle Regiment. His death caused a sudden breakdown in Russian command coordination, leaving forward units scattered and exposed. This also exposes the brittleness of Russian forces that employ a highly vertical command structure with little responsibility or initiative passed down the junior ranks. The Sumy campaign shows that even after years of grinding war, Ukraine is learning, adapting, striking back. This is far more than just a stagnating battlefield. It's far more than just the ebb and flow of attritional warfare. It's a test of Ukraine's resilience and a test of the pace of innovation and successful deployment and scaling up of that innovation. Ukraine seems to be winning this race. The world should take note. With limited resources, Ukraine is defending not just its borders, but the entire idea that aggression brute force and mass can triumph. Ukraine is showing that a larger and more brutish enemy can be stopped by courage and intelligence. Well, we'll end this episode with Syrskyi's words. We are strengthening our positions and preparing to counterattack. That's not just a military statement of intent. That's a call to arms that reflects an extraordinary national ethos of Ukrainians. But as those fighting would point out, what choice do they have? It's either survive or be erased, either reach a stalemate and fight a forever war, or aim for an outright eventual victory.